Hey there guys, I'm back to another game review. Today we're taking a look at Ratchet & Clank Size Matters on the PlayStation 5. The newest addition to the PS Classics library, the PSP spin-off title is now playable on modern hardware with emulation features. The game has some unique ideas for the franchise, but most of them don't stick the landing.
When I was a kid, I remember playing this game on various car rides during the summer. It wasn't the best Ratchet and Clank game, but one that was on the go and good enough for the PlayStation Portable. I wanted to play the PS2 version in 2020 as a live stream session, but never got around to it. Ratchet and Clank Size Matters definitely feels like a spin-off game. The core gameplay and level design is very reminiscent of the PS2 era. However, in execution, this might be the worst Ratchet and Clank game due to weapon imbalancing, too many minigames, and performance that's worse than I remembered. Developed by High Impact Games, a team of former Insomniac and Naughty Dog employees, this game was released about 2 years after the PSP launch in 2005. Daxter had the spotlight the previous year, so it's time for Insomniac's platforming mascot to shine. The story begins with Ratchet and Clank relaxing on the beach, enjoying their vacation as full-time heroes. The duo then meet Luna, a schoolgirl who's doing a report on superheroes. She's then kidnapped by the Technomites and the heroes have to save her. It starts off relatively normal for a Ratchet and Clank story. Once Luna is revealed to be a robot controlled by the Technomites, it starts to get weird. That plot twist is still memorable, but cloning Ratchet with his DNA is still a crazy plot point. It causes Ratchet to be aggressive and very angsty for the rest of the adventure. I mean, if I was experimented on, I'd be pissed off too, but chill out a little bit. The overall characterization of Ratchet is very similar to how he was within Ratchet and Clank 1, and he's just an asshole. In the first scene, he just walks over Clank's sandcastle for no reason. I guess these former Insomniac employees liked how he was before and not the new, more likable Ratchet. It also makes me question where this game takes place in the overall Ratchet and Clank timeline. The game plays like a mix between Ratchet and Clank 1 and Going Commando, so I guess somewhere in between there, probably after Deadlock. It obviously doesn't matter that much, but it's the headcanon I go for to explain why Ratchet is still such a dickhead. The main villain is Otto, and he's okay. He's just a generic bad guy doing super evil things. You don't get that much time with him, so it's hard to get a feeling of his overall villainy. Captain Quark is in the game for a few gags as he's looking for his parents. This subplot is so bad, I legit didn't care for it at all. Ratchet and Clank Size Matters has a messy story that gives our heroes an excuse to go on another adventure. How Ratchet behaves might throw off some players, especially if you never played the first game on the PS2. Luna was a great red herring, but falls apart after everything is revealed. She doesn't get to do much after fooling the duo. Otto is whatever, literally just there for the final fight. If you remember anything from this game, it'll be Ratchet's dickhead behavior and Luna's eventual reveal. Besides that, the story is surface level stuff and pretty forgettable. When this game got added to the PS Classics library, they opted to give us the PSP version, which was a great call as the later PS2 port was met with a ton of technical bugs. Controlling Ratchet feels about how you would expect. I did have to rely on the shoulder buttons to control the camera because they also map these buttons for the hover jump. Damien, my best friend and co-host of our podcast, he said that he could use the right analog sticks to control the camera, but that never worked for me unless I remapped it. And doing that is pointless because, like I said, I need the shoulder buttons to do the hover jump. Strafing is in the game and can be activated with the D-pad, or you could just have Ratchet do it automatically. He looks goofy strafing all the time, but it makes fighting enemies and bosses so much easier. Your hand will for sure cramp up if you continuously use the D-pad. The traditional Ratchet and Clank gameplay makes its return here. It's what you would expect from the series in the early 2000s. The camera is a bit close and makes seeing all the enemies in an area tough at times. You'll start with the blaster and bomb glove before unlocking more weapons in the shop as you advance the adventure. Try your best to save up bullets for the later weapons because everything you unlock during this mid portion of the game straight up sucks. The shotgun does no damage. The sniper is an odd choice, especially when most enemies you can't even see that far away. The flamethrower is mid, and everything else is okay. Save your bolts to buy the rocket launcher, the shield barrier, and the laser tracer when they become available. They are by far the best weapons in the game and will make fighting the final boss that much easier. Due to this weapon imbalancing, where half of them are kind of useless, it makes dealing with enemies difficult at times. You'll quickly level your blaster and bomb glove to level 4, and after that, you kind of have to stick with those guns until the later ones unlock. First time playing this game as a kid, I had no idea how bad the weapon unlocks were at the midpoint of the game. I learned from previous Ratchet & Clank games that I could just buy whatever and I'll be fine. The final boss is a pain in the ass if you don't have the laser tracer, the rocket launcher, and the shield barrier. The enemies up to that point, even with good armor, do a ton of damage as well. This lack of balance between weapons and enemy strength feels like the developers didn't playtest this game enough. Bolts are another problem because the later weapons obviously cost a ton, which makes saving as many bolts as possible almost a requirement. The game straight up does not have enough crates in each area. This is where the laundry list of minigames come into play. It's actually not that long, but there's 5 different ones that you need to look out for. You have the Skyboard races, the Giant Clank, and the Clank challenges. The Skyboard races are just hoverboard races from Ratchet & Clank 1, but 10 times worse. The controls are god-awful, which makes navigating the tracks that much harder. If I didn't have the rewind feature, I think I would have been stuck on these challenges for a couple more hours. Giant Clank is an on-rail shooter where Clank is traveling through space shooting enemies. Sometimes there's a boss fight at the end, but it's a matter of destroying all the enemies and staying alive. Lastly, the Clank challenges are split into 3 different types: Destruction Derby, Gadgetbot Toss, and Gadgetbot Survival. Destruction Derby is a battle arena where Clank has to destroy the other bots to win the match. It all boils down to smashing the other robots faster while picking up nanotech to stay alive and sub-weapons to deal extra damage. Gadgetbot Toss has Clank score goals by throwing Gadgetbots into a gate. Meanwhile, the other bots on the field are also trying to score and steal the Gadgetbot away from you. You can punch, block, and throw bombs to stop potential goals. Honestly, all I did was try to get the Gadgetbot first and run around until I scored it. If the AI managed to score it first, then so be it. It wasn't the end of the world. Picking up the Gadgetbot after punching one of the allies is kind of finicky. It's pretty much like soccer/football, but just much worse. Gadgetbot Survival is a puzzle-based game where you need to guide the Gadgetbots into the goals. You have to plan ahead in how many bots you have and how many you need for the goals. This is probably my favorite one because it's simple, it works, but it's also very boring to play. Playing these minigames will grant you a ton of bolts, and if you happen to finish all of them, you'll also be granted an in-game upgrade as well. The problem with them is that there's far too many later in the game, which makes completing them feel more like a hassle than anything. Also, most of them have terrible controls and are not fun to play. Even Gadgetbot Survival I like, but it wasn't rewarding to complete when I also had to get through the other Clank challenges to unlock them. I can see why High Impact Games added so many minigames as a quick pick up and play thing, but I was never excited to play them. There's no Gladiator Arena, which would have been a great replacement for a good amount of these Clank minigames. It's likely not in the game because of the limitations of the PSP, but there's a final gauntlet at the end featuring Ratchet clones, so I don't know. I completed a good chunk of these minigames too, but that wasn't enough bolts for the final boss. Before fighting Otto, I was only down to a few thousand, dying a few times later, and I didn't have enough bolts for ammo. Thank God I have the rewind feature because I was not going to go back to a random planet to grind more bolts or go and play more minigames. I was ready to pack this game up and call it quits. On the bright side, the levels and planets feel very much at home with Ratchet and Clank. The first beach level is pretty cool before later transitioning into the industrial buildings. There's a dream level with Ratchet that's pretty neat and trippy to play through. Armor upgrades return with each part free to customize. If you complete a full set, you unlock a special bonus for the wrench. It's a cool concept that Insomniac Games never fully explored in the mainline series. The wrench bonus is fine because you're not going to be swinging your wrench at that point of the game anyway. The gadgets have to be equipped to use them and won't automatically appear like in Up Your Arsenal and Onward. Having to put the Hyper Shot and the Sprout-O-Matic in the Quick Select menu for ease of access sucked, but it's just how Ratchet and Clank games were back in the day. I just wish there was a second quick select wheel so I could just plop all the gadgets in there. The Shrink Ray is used when Ratchet and Clank have to unlock a door to advance. It's a simple grind rail challenge where you have to hit the switch to unlock the door. For a title called Size Matters, this is the only gameplay feature where you shrink down. The story uses it from time to time, like a town is very small, so our heroes have to shrink down to explore it. There's another time where Ratchet goes inside of Clank's head to reboot him, so obviously he has to shrink down. But after shrinking down and fighting a bunch of robots, Ratchet has to shrink down again to unlock a door inside of Clank's head. And I'm thinking, he can do that? Like, literally at this point, he is so tiny within that lock trying to unlock this door. It doesn't really make that much sense, but I'm kind of just nitpicking at this point. It just seems like a continuity issue or something, but I digress. Ratchet & Clank Size Matters is mediocre from a gameplay perspective. The regular 3D action platforming is good at times, great even. The weapon imbalancing is a huge issue where first-time players who don't know that all the weapon unlocks until the final act are useless will be wasting bolts. The endless hoverboard races and Clank minigames are terrible to play. Even the semi-okay ones aren't that fun to play, but if you want to have enough bolts for strong weapons, you're gonna have to complete a good chunk of these before the final boss. Visually and on paper, this is a Ratchet & Clank game. In execution, high-impact games definitely miss the mark. The presentation on the PlayStation 5 is hit or miss. The graphics are solid and up-res the visuals for 2024 standards. Cutscenes are still crusty because they weren't made for a console experience. The camera is going to be close to Ratchet & Clank regardless because it's supposed to be on a tiny screen. However, the camera controls get messed up often where I don't even know where I am at times. Audio also gets cut out randomly too, and I don't know why. I ran into a glitch with the Sprout-O-Matic and I couldn't advance. The plant would get stuck and not spawn the platforms at all. This forced me to reload the game because rewinding it wouldn't fix it. I appreciate the authenticity though of just porting the game straight up onto the PS Classics library.
Ratchet & Clank Size Matters is definitely worse than I remembered. Playing it on the PS4/PS5 is the way to go because the rewind mechanic makes the skyboard races more manageable. Ratchet does not behave like a hero and regresses back to his character to the 2002 original. The platforming action is standard Ratchet & Clank affair with some unique ideas like the dream sequence levels and armor swapping. The weapon imbalancing, front-loaded amount of minigames, and lack of bolts makes Ratchet & Clank Size Matters feels like an incomplete game for the series. I'm sure if High Impact Games created it for the PS2 at the time, the game would have been better to play. With how the game shipped out, it's hard for me to recommend this one. It is only $10, but you are getting a pretty bad Ratchet & Clank experience. The game is 6 hours long too, so if you want to finish it in one sitting, you can. But if you want to check this game out, be my guest and do so. But for me personally, I think you're not really missing out on much here. So yeah, that is my review. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have not already, you can subscribe. I put new videos up on Saturdays. Follow me on social media at TV Sonic Gaming on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, pretty much everything. You can also check out my podcast called the Travis and Damien Podcast. We talk about games, movies, and anime every other week. And yeah, that is all I have for today. Thank you guys for watching this video once again, and I'll see you guys next time with more videos.